Welcome to Culture, Worldview, and Origins. We're Tim and Holly Nyquist. We're in Chapter 13, Kuhn's Critical Thinking. We're on session number 9. Chapter 9, the nature and necessity of scientific revolutions. So what we're going to talk about is that, now keep this in mind, what is the nature and why are they necessary, scientific revolutions? Kuhn says, what are scientific revolutions and what is their function in scientific development? Scientific revolutions are, here, taken to be those non-accumulative developmental episodes in which an older paradigm is replaced in whole or part by an incompatible new one. Okay, so revolution to Thomas Kuhn is the replacing of one paradigm with another, and that they are mostly incompatible, because he does say in whole or part, but I would say that it's mostly in whole, that because each paradigm represents a package deal of theory, habit, prejudices, and culture that influence how one sees things. And so everybody needs to be on the same page. They need to see the same thing. So they have to adopt, either discard the whole thing, keep going with the old, or discard the whole thing and adopt the new one. Why should a change of paradigm be called a revolution? In both political and scientific development, the sense of malfunction that can lead to crisis is prerequisite to revolution. So he brings in the concept of political fields, of political practice, in both political and scientific development, the sense of malfunction. So it's kind of similar, is that how's the economy going? How is whatever the instance is that politics controls, are you content with that? And now he's shifting that and saying, okay, now take that same thought and feeling and apply it to the scientific enterprise. Are you happy with the way it's going? Are you happy with where it's leading to? Are you happy with what the paradigm offers you and what allows you to do? So to be in a crisis is the prerequisite to revolution. Like the choice between competing political institutions, that between competing paradigms proves to be a choice between incompatible modes of community life. Now we're not just talking about science here, or data, or what we're talking about here is what he ends it with, proves to be a choice between incompatible modes of community life. So now he's bringing in another facet, which drives a lot of the scientific enterprise, is that it's a community. And if you observe something or say that there is an anomaly, it's not a puzzle, it's an anomaly. A puzzle is something that you have faith will be solved within the box, within the paradigm. An anomaly is you don't think it can be solved within the box with the tools that you currently have. But if you choose to call it an anomaly or a counter instance, then what you're also risking is incompatible mode of community life. When paradigms enter, as they must, into a debate about paradigm choice, their role is necessarily circular. Each group uses its own paradigm to argue in that paradigm's defense. With the house diagram of what we've put together, it's it has the foundation, which is the choosing of your epistemological source of reliable knowledge. And then you've got your conclusion, the roof, number 14. You conclude basically whatever limits you have put on reality within your foundation. And so the house is circular, which now Thomas Kuhn is saying that the debate between paradigms is circular, because you're using the theories and the data or the facts produced by that paradigm for its defense and attacking against a counter paradigm. To discover why this issue of paradigm choice can never be unequivocally settled by logic and experiment alone, we must shortly examine the nature of the differences that separate the proponents of a traditional paradigm from their revolutionary successors. Separate the proponents. I'm not sure if we're talking about the scientists that are proponing or the proponents that are part of the paradigm, but he's saying that the choice can never be settled by logic and experiment alone. We must shortly examine the nature of the differences that separate the proponents of a traditional paradigm from their revolutionary successors. In section 10, this is section 9, in section 10, chapter 10, we shall discover how closely the view of science as accumulation is entangled with a dominant epistemology that takes knowledge to be a construction placed directly upon raw sense data by the mind. Okay, so what he's saying is that those that promote the theory of science or the image of science as an accumulation, as a successive, linear, accumulative process, he's saying that comes from a certain epistemological school. And so epistemology deals with knowledge. Epistemology is the foundation, the choosing of the reliable source of knowledge, and it's the methods, what methods you choose. It has to do with knowledge. So what Thomas Kuhn is saying is that the view of accumulation as science is entangled with a dominant epistemology that takes knowledge. What is knowledge? He says they believe knowledge to be a construction that is placed directly upon the raw sense data, okay, directly, which would be called realism, or it could be called realism in a way, but whatever it is direct. There are no intermediaries that are affecting the interpretation of that raw sense, that raw data, and the mind or the thought of it. And what Kuhn is implying is that there's other epistemological theories that do not believe that it is a direct connection between the directly upon the raw senses by the mind, that there is a separation there, that there's indirect in that, and that's where I also, is critical realism. Critical realism believes that yes, there is a real world, real data, but we do not have direct access to it. We don't have direct access. It's indirect. We have access only through our perceptions, which are influenced by theory, habit, prejudice, and culture. Only when these attempts at articulation fail do scientists encounter the third type of phenomena, the recognized anomalies whose characteristic feature is their stubborn refusal to be assimilated to existing paradigms. Okay, only when all attempts have failed and that the scientists encounter this third type. It's a recognized now anomaly whose characteristic feature is that they are stubborn. Stubborn refusal to be assimilated into the existing paradigm. And so what is a scientist to do? You have two choices. Either you set it aside and you say, we're going to wait. We're going to wait for better instruments because I like being a scientist and I like practicing my trade. So they will wait for somebody else maybe come and go work on another puzzle. Or where he's saying is that is going to be its refusal to be assimilated into the existing paradigm is impetus for substituting that paradigm. This type alone gives rise to new theories. Paradigms provide all phenomena except anomalies, with a theory-determined place in the scientist's field of vision. So again, the scientists have a field of vision, and the theory gives them all the tools necessary to deal with these puzzles. But if it's classified as an anomaly, then that means there aren't enough tools, or the tools aren't specialized enough or determined enough to handle this anomaly, which then gives rise to new theories, or can give rise to new theories to those that are willing to run with it. Without commitment to the paradigm, there could be no normal science. Furthermore, that commitment must extend to areas and to degrees of precision for which there is no full precedent. If it did not, the paradigm could provide no puzzles that had not already been solved. Okay, so again, we're back to the paradigm that the community has to have a paradigm. And yes, there's going to be, to practice science, there must be puzzles to practice on. And so if a paradigm solved all the puzzles all at once, there would be nothing left to work on. So in other words, every paradigm has its problems. Every paradigm generates counter instances, practically. But early on, they're called puzzles. And so then you work on this one. If you can't get that one done, then you go to another table and work on another puzzle until you get one that you feel comfortable working on. So each paradigm then comes in fully realizing it doesn't have all the answers. And so, but when then does the puzzle become a crisis? When an anomaly or a counter instance? Just because it did not involve the introduction of additional objects or concepts, the transition from Newtonian to Einsteinian mechanics illustrates with particular clarity the scientific revolution as a displacement of the conceptual network through which scientists view the world. Kuhn is saying that the change from Newtonian mechanics to Einsteinian mechanics did not involve any objects. It didn't even, or concepts. But it says to clarify the scientific as a displacement of the conceptual network through which scientists view the world. So he's talking about the whole network, and he calls it conceptual, meaning that, well, up here he says there was no introduction of additional objects or concepts. And then down below he says it was displacement of the conceptual network, which then, okay, so I think we're back to paradigms and theories in that there were no introduction of new objects. There was no introduction of redefinition of concepts, but there was a whole change between the two at a theoretical level. And by changing to a theoretical level, it changed everything. It changed how things work together. And that brings us back again to Stephen Jay Gould. Stephen Jay Gould was trying to introduce a change, a revolutionary change in biology by suggesting that things do not happen on a slow, gradual, linear accumulation, as in Darwinism, but that it happened in blocks, in revolutions. And so Stephen Jay Gould, being a biologist, promoted the theory of punctuated equilibrium, which means that it goes in bursts. The change of species went in bursts, whereas Darwin says it was gradual and linear. And so Stephen Jay Gould, who this quote is from, says, "First facts do not come to us as objective items seen in the same unambiguous way by all reasonable people. Theory, habit, prejudice, and culture all influence the facts we choose to observe and the way in which we perceive them." And that's back to the glasses here, in that we have questions, we have the world, we have glasses. And the glasses are what influence our interpretation, our conclusion of what the world means. But paradigms differ in more than substance, for they are directed not only to nature, but also back upon the science that produced them. They are the source of the methods, problem field, and standards of solution accepted by any mature scientific community at any given time. So a paradigm shift is a shift of the whole house. The whole house changes from the bottom floor up. There's a shift in the rules, in the beliefs, in the methods, and how science sees the world. The Weltanschauung, which is the worldview. Changes in the standards governing permissible problems, concepts, and explanations can transform a science. In the next section, I will even suggest a sense in which they transform the world. So Thomas Kuhn does not believe in a direct connect between the raw sense data and the mind processing it, but believes that there is something in between. He calls it a worldview, even though it's not really defined. He doesn't define it. But again, Thomas Kuhn wrote this in 1962, before the concept of worldview was really becoming popular, before it was really becoming defined. In learning a paradigm, the scientist acquires theory, habit, prejudice, and culture, methods, and standards together, usually in an inextricable mixture. Therefore, when paradigms change, there are usually significant shifts in the criteria determining the legitimacy both of problems and of proposed solutions. Your proposed solution has to fit within the parameters of what is an acceptable solution. The problems are also defined, and the solution has as much definition as well. And again, we're looking at the house, and the house is a paradigm. You change any part of the house on the lower structure, and it's going to change the structure above it. And it's going to change. You change in the epistemological source, you change in the rules that govern it, it's going to change the methods. It's a package deal that one influences the other. Like the issue of competing standards, that question of values can be answered only in terms of criteria that lie outside of normal science. Yeah, values are outside of science, but values are in the house. Values are the top floor, the axiology. So now we're talking values. Only in terms of criteria that lie outside of normal science altogether. And it is that recourse to external criteria that most makes paradigm debates revolutionary. Thomas Kuhn is now introducing another dimension. He's introducing values. But if we go back to the house diagram, we see values are the top floor, or actually the attic, the axiology. And that produces the aesthetics and values of a system. So every paradigm has values, has aesthetics. And what Thomas Kuhn is bringing in here is that a change of paradigm, yes, it changes methods, but it also changes values and aesthetics. And so that is what it is, the recourse, that recourse to external criteria. What are external to science is the values. The values are above and outside of science. To external criteria that most makes paradigm debates revolutionary. Something even more fundamental than standards and values is, however, also at stake. I have so far argued only that paradigms are constitutive of science. Now I wish to display a sense in which they are also constitutive of nature as well. I think what he's going at here is that nature is there, but how we see it, it's constituted differently because of our paradigm. We see it differently. People that have different belief systems see different worlds. And this is what Thomas Kuhn is, that something even more fundamental than standards and values is the change that it makes to science, but not only science, but to the world itself, or the world that scientists live in. This is wrapping session number 9. We're Tim and Holly Nyquist. If you'd like to communicate with us, you can through the addresses here on the board. We're in chapter 13 on Thomas Kuhn, on critical thinking and his applying it to science, session 9. Thank you again for joining me.